Hello, welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is horrific. We need to be sure to keep the word out, protect our kids. A lot of information to share on this, so please bear with us. Bear with me. Start off with the Bible verse like we usually do. Some of my stuff moved around, so I had to play around and move it again. Okay. In Matthew 18, verse 6. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Matthew 18:10. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. Got to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow, as it says in Isaiah 1:17. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips and balance in favor of fair use. Relay that about the suicide prevention. If in the United States, you can dial the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. Hey there, good to see you too. How are you doing, Tammy? Yeah, it's a sad situation. I mean, which one did you watch? Um, just got through doing another one a few minutes ago based on the little boy, that little girl that was 4 years old that lost her life as well. So now this is one of the cases of sextortion. Timothy Barnett, age 13. Thank you to his mother for bringing awareness about this. Yeah, the one with the 4 year old little girl. That was horrific. It makes me sad, cry. I'm probably going to have some more tears going over this with about Timothy Barnett as well. He was 13 years old. Without further ado, thanks everyone for coming. Be sure to advocate. There's going to be a lot shown in here, so please bear with me, all right? Here's the little boy right here, Timothy Barnett. And if y'all like podcasts, y'all ought to go to Bits News and support that person. Got a podcast where you can listen to the article. Innocence shattered. Sextortion claims another victim in South Carolina. The story of Timothy Barnett. Timothy Barnett embodied the essence of a typical 13-year-old boy. A seventh grade honor student, and that means he was very smart. He was an honor student at Alice Drive Middle School in Sumter, South Carolina. He adored baseball, held a yellow belt in karate from the Academy of Martial Arts, and passionately played the saxophone. He had dreams of becoming a major league baseball player one day. Timothy's radiant smile lit up every room he entered. He was the life of every party. He loved cracking jokes and making people laugh. To those who knew Timothy, he was a son, a brother, a friend, and a diligent student, but most importantly, he was still a child. To everyone who knew and loved Timothy, the world came crashing down in the early morning hours of April the 6th, 2023, when his stepfather discovered his lifeless body in the front yard of their home with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. For Timothy's mother, Betsy Hopman, the nightmare that unfolded that fateful Thursday morning was just the beginning. In the hours before his death, Timothy could be seen on security camera footage sitting in his mom's car for anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours, frantically scrolling through his phone. She immediately noticed he seemed distracted and wondered whether he was on drugs, but the toxicology report run by the coroner indicated no drugs were in his system. What Betsy didn't know at the time, what she couldn't have known, was that Timothy had been the victim of sextortion. What she didn't know and couldn't have known was that in the final moments of his life, he was pleading with a nameless, faceless criminal out to expose him. Please, I'm just a child, Timothy is said to have pleaded with this unknown blackmailer. Betsy also had no idea that to uncover what truly happened to her son and attain the justice he deserves, she would have to fight to a protracted battle with local law enforcement. For those of you unfamiliar with sextortion scams, they typically target young men between the age of 14 through 17 and are occurring with increasing frequency in our country. According to the FBI, the agency has seen an especially large uptick in financial sextortion, in which teens are coerced into sending explicit images and then extorted for money. Over the past year, law enforcement has received over 7,000 reports related to the online financial sextortion of minors, resulting in at least 3,000 victims. That's at least, mostly young boys and more than a dozen suicides, the agency noted in a December 19th press release. Timothy Barnett became another tragic casualty of this alarming trend. Betsy's mother believed she was diligently fulfilling her role as a parent to safeguard him from online predators. She routinely inspected his phone and supervised his online activities. In fact, during the summer before his death, Betsy had found inappropriate communications from a woman on her son's Snapchat account and had taken it away from him as a punishment. After Timothy eventually persuaded her to restore his access as an early birthday gift, they engaged in a crucial conversation about responsible usage of the platform, a discussion some parents find challenging to broach with their children. We had the conversation with the kids. Like bad people are really out there. We don't talk to strangers in real life. We don't talk to strangers on the internet because sometimes internet strangers are more dangerous. During that conversation, Betsy says she told her young son, remember, only friends. Just a few weeks before his death, Timothy came to his mother and told her someone else had messaged him. Betsy asked him what he did about it. Timothy assured her he had blocked the person. Timothy was still worried she would take the app away from him again, but she assured him she wouldn't. As long as you blocked them you're good, she said. She wonders now if he really did block the person, though. I have a friend that's in a nursing home, and I blocked plenty of people trying to help him that were trying to exploit him, but they still kept getting through. The morning of April 6, 2023 started out like any other morning at the Hopton house. Betsy said goodbye to her husband as he prepared to leave for work and headed to the kitchen to make her morning coffee. Tim's usually the first person to greet me in the morning, she said. Normally I start my hot water for coffee, and by the time the kettle's done, Timothy is at the coffee bar hugging me. This morning, though, Timothy was nowhere to be found. Around this time, her husband Jeffrey called her and instructed her to lock the front door. According to him, someone was sleeping in the front yard. He told her he was going to call 911 and hung up. Moments later, he called her back and told her to check on the kids, which she did. This is the beautiful boy that did not deserve it. With a growing sense of unease, Betsy began a systematic check on her children's rooms, ensuring their safety by counting their sleeping bodies. When she reached Timothy's room, her heart sank as she realized he was not there. Her search quickly moved to every familiar corner of the house where she thought Timothy might have ventured, including the bathroom, kitchen, and pantry. At that point, my stomach dropped because there's a person in the yard, and now my son's not here. Betsy said, and come to find out, it was my son lying in my front yard with a gunshot wound to his head. The Sumter, South Carolina Police Department responded to the scene and opened an investigation. Among their initial actions was a review of the home security camera footage. Sumter police also took Timothy's phone and school-issued Chromebook as part of their investigation. Betsy made sure investigators understood Timothy's communications were primarily through the Snapchat application so they would know where to look. There was a problem, though. Timothy had recently changed the passcode to his phone, and Betsy did not know the new one. This meant investigators would need to unlock it using software created for that purpose. On April the 18th, 2023, lead detective Kelsey Wade assured Betsy investigators were hard at work doing just that and promised to keep her apprised of their progress. Wade also indicated they would be sending a subpoena to Snapchat to obtain records related to the case. Betsy went back to picking up the pieces of her shattered family. Competent investigators were hard at work figuring out what was on her son's phone that left him so distraught that he took his own life. She called twice every week to get updates and asked investigators if there was anything she could do to assist investigators with the process of unlocking his phone. Twice a week she left a message with investigators asking for an update, and not one time did she receive a response. On June 27, 2023, frustrated by the lack of communication from law enforcement, she called the chief of police and explained to her secretary what was happening. Shortly after her call, she received a call from Detective Wade, who finally provided her with an update. They still hadn't been able to get to Timothy's phone, but they were able to obtain a partial download. Wade also told her he had subpoenaed Snapchat for records relating to Timothy's account and planned to send a second subpoena to Snapchat along with one to Cash App. Wade assured the weary mom she would let her know of any updates. Last month, Betsy got a notification from Life 360 that Timothy's phone had just completed a 3-mile drive over 5 months after he died. Wondering if police had gotten into his phone, she called and texted Wade, but received no response. On October the 14th, 2023, Betsy decided it was time to go back to the police department and get some answers. Armed with a paperback book and nothing but time, she sat on the bench in the reception area and waited. Someone finally came to speak with her. It wasn't Detective Wade. It was another detective and a staff sergeant. The staff sergeant told Betsy he was sorry to inform her that they were unable to get into Timothy's locked phone, that is now the equivalent of a paperweight. He then told her the investigator into her son's death had officially been closed. According to Betsy, investigators told her it wasn't their job to figure out why her son killed himself. Can y'all believe that? Feeling sad, but also feeling an odd sense of relief at the closing of the chapter, Betsy initially accepted the conclusion. Shortly thereafter, though, she learned evidence existed which pointed to her son as being a victim of sextortion. She learned in October that the Cash App account he tried to send money to in the hopes of stopping the release of whatever materials he sent belonged to a 51 to 61-year-old female residing in Los Angeles County, California. Wow. She's responsible for his death. More importantly, she learned that as a result of this new information, a new investigation into the circumstances surrounding her son's death have been opened. And it goes on to talk about sextortion in South Carolina. With the enactment of Gavin's Law in South Carolina, sextortion is now a felony punishable by lengthy prison sentences. But while the legislative language notes points to the collaboration amongst government entities to implement a policy to educate and notify students of the provisions of this act, which includes adequate notice to students, parents, or guardians, the public, and school personnel of the change in law. There's no mention of a plan to educate those tasked with enforcing it and prosecuting it. After learning Timothy's case would be investigated more thoroughly by federal law enforcement agency, Bessie decided to file an official report. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security are now conducting an investigation into Timothy Barnett's death. Unfortunately, it seems like the national law enforcement agencies like the FBI and Homeland Security take it extremely seriously, she said. However, it took me going into the police station and figuring it all out, saying, "Where's this standing?" to find out it was buried within a police file, a closed case. A fear is how many others committed suicide, and it was brushed off as a depressed teenager. It was brushed off as a depressed middle aged man. It was brushed off as a depressed young girl rather than for what it is. Someone's extorting somebody and giving them no other option. Here's a get information about Gavin's Law in South Carolina. To report possible exploitation of a young person or child, contact your local FBI field office or call 1 800 call FBI or report it online at tipsfbi.gov. I think I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to see how it works and how to talk to your children about it. So I'm going to go back over here right quick and watch and show y'all how that goes. Yeah, that is crazy, ain't it? Hey, little Wing, good to see you. See, she kept doing that too, getting that out there, right? I'm going to go right here, scroll along bottom, and banner. Let's get that one at the bottom. To report possible exploitation of a young person or child, contact your local FBI field office. I got it down there scrolling at the bottom, everyone. Exactly. So I got to change the video. Y'all will not be able to hear me. So let me change that right quick. Mind showing how?
On the morning of April 6, 2023, 6 months ago, a young boy sat in the driveway of his parents' home in Sumter, South Carolina. What they didn't know at the time, but know now, is that as he sat in that driveway scrolling through his phone, he was trying desperately to stave off a sextortion attack. Now, if you've followed this news outlet for any amount of time, you know that we've focused extensively on the issue of sextortion. In fact, we've had the author of the sextortion bill in South Carolina, whose own son died from one of these attacks, appear on our show to talk about this cowardly cyberbullying. Brandon Guffey has succeeded in pushing legislation that has expanded the penalties for this heinous crime up to 20 years for those who target victims of sextortion. But it is still a new crime. It's a new law. And as a result, the investigations into that crime and into the sextortion attacks are new, often with prosecutorial and law enforcement agencies that are inexperienced in prosecuting these crimes. Sometimes we end up with cases in which justice becomes very elusive for the families of the victims of sextortion. We're joined today by Betsy Hoffman. And Betsy, the young man we were just speaking of, was your son, wasn't he?
Yes, sir. Timothy was a beautiful soul.
I want to thank you for being here, for being willing to share everything that you've gone through, not only at that moment back in the spring, but since then. Before we get into it, though, tell us a little bit about your son. I know he was a star student, a musician.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us. So Timothy was 13 years old. He turned 13 March 6th of 2023. He was a yellow belt in karate, played baseball. He loved playing second base on his Parks and Rec team. His dream was to be a Major League Baseball player. He wanted to be a pitcher, and he did pitch a couple games. First game of his life was actually three batters were up, three batters got out, so he was pretty decent. He also played the saxophone. He started in sixth grade, started at beginning level band and jumped from beginning level to the honors band in the 7th grade, and he was first chair for saxophone in the middle school's band. He was the life of the party. If Timothy was around, he was cracking jokes, biggest smiles of the room, always had a comedic interlude in it. He was truly just a joy to be around, but typical teenager.
Into stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he liked Snapchat. He loved TikTok. He played Fortnite. He played Modern Warfare. But typically he kept a close-knit circle and played with his friends, Steph, Gabe, the other Gabe. Really close-knit team of kids, so.
Fun young man.
He really was.
And siblings?
Yeah, he has quite a few siblings. He's got two full brothers, Travis and JJ, 15 and 11, or 16 and 11 now. He's got a half brother, Jaden, who is 21. He's got 3 stepsisters, Leah, Grayson, and Landon, who all loved and adored him. Leah and Tim were best friends. Travis and Tim fought like brothers. JJ and Tim fought like brothers. But in the end, they would do anything for each other as well. They would fight other people like brothers too.
Oh yeah, I can pick on them, but you can't pick on them. That's the age-old rule of brothers. I remember that from my days, my little brother. Let me ask you this. A few weeks before this awful morning, back in the spring of this year, you'd mentioned that you'd seen something on one of the kids' phones, and you kind of brought everybody together. Tell us a little bit about that, this lead up to what happened.
Sure. So it was actually back in August. Looking back at my text message, I found it. It was in August of 2022. On Timothy's phone, actually, I found a video from Snapchat. And it was of this woman that was exposing herself. And I asked Timothy what was going on, and he told me, she made me, she sent it to me in exchange for an Instagram account. And I knew nothing about sextortion at that time. And I said, dude, that's not cool. We don't talk like that. That's not, Snapchat's supposed to be communicating with your friends, not people that you know. And he's like, yeah, I don't know her. And I was like, let's stop that. I took away Snapchat. Back in January, December or January, we gave it back to him. He asked for it to be one of his early birthday presents, just so he could communicate with his best friend who doesn't have a telephone. like a cell phone plan service. And that's how he always communicated. So I said, okay, we'll do it. If you need me, tell me about it. But remember, only friends. So we had that conversation. We had the conversation with the kids. Like, bad people are really out there. We don't talk to strangers in real life. We don't talk to strangers on the internet because sometimes internet strangers are more dangerous. So, and at that point, I actually talked to them about like the dangers of sex trafficking, because that's what I thought about Instagrams, like, oh, I'm going to meet up with this person or whatnot, because that was kind of the dangers of our childhood or my childhood, the online chat rooms. So he said, okay. Tim came to me, I guess, in March, maybe beginning of March, maybe end of February, saying that he someone else had messaged him. And I said, okay, what did you do about it? And he said, I blocked them. Okay. He's like, just please, he's like, what are you going to do about Snapchat? And I was like, just don't talk to them. Like, as long as you blocked them, you're good. So he continued to talk to his friends and went along business. And that was the conversation that was had about that. And come to find out, I don't know if he truly blocked them.
Walk us through the morning of April 6th this year.
Okay. The morning of April 6th was just like any other morning. My husband and I own our own business, and he got up to go to work first. We had just signed a contract with one of our clients, and he was going to go work on some trailers. Got up. I started my coffee. Jeff walked out the front door. I get a phone call from Jeff saying, lock the front door. What's going on? He said, there's someone in our yard. I don't know who it is, but it looks like they're sleeping. So he's like, I'm calling the cops. He calls the cops. And then he, at that time, calls me back saying, check on the kids. So, of course, I go bedroom to bedroom. I stop in Leah's room first because hers is at the beginning of the hallway. Then I go to Travis's room. They're there. I go to JJ's room, or JJ and Tim's room, because they share a room. We call it the bunk room, where the boys all share a room. JJ's there up in his bed. Timothy's not there. That's not abnormal. Tim's usually the first person to greet me in the morning. Normally I start my water for coffee. And by the time the kettle is done to pour into the French press, Timothy's at the coffee bar hugging me. So I was like, okay. And I'm talking to Jeff, and I was like, Tim's not here. He's like, okay, like, not abnormal. Check to see if he's in the shower. No, he's not in the shower, not in the bathroom, doors open. I'm like, well, maybe he's in the pantry. Walk back to the kitchen, go through the pantry, not there. And I was like, well, maybe he's getting a drink from the drink fridge. No. And at that point, my stomach dropped because there's a person in the yard, and now my son's not here. Come to find out, it was my son laying in my yard with a gunshot wound to his head.
The initial stages of this investigation, obviously focusing on what happened. Tell us, what were the first things you learned about what happened?
Of course. So we have security cameras. And through those security cameras, we saw Timothy had opened up his bedroom window, walked out of the bedroom window, and you can see him walk down the not down the driveway, but down the pathway, far enough away from the doorbell camera that goes to, like, notifications go to both mine and my husband's phone that would have woken us up. Walked down the pathway, not notifying the camera, got into my car with my keys. You could see it unlock. He sat in the car. and you could see him scroll through the phone. He proceeded to stay on camera. I think he got out into the car. I think he snuck out the window about 3:25, 3:30-ish.
So he's in there for a while.
Yes, sir. He was in the car from 3:30 until 4:45, and then you go see him go off camera. And there is a blind spot in our driveway where our backyard camera doesn't pick up that certain spot because of the angle of the house. And then, so at 4:45, about 4:45, he walked off camera, and at 5:10 or 5:15, he walked back to the car and sat down. And at 5:35, he walked off screen for the final time. And my husband at that point you could see my husband go out of the house at about 6:15, 6:20.
You know now that during those hours he was pleading with whoever it was that was attempting to extort him. And walk us through a little bit of what you've been able to find out about those final moments.
Sure. I haven't really found out a whole bunch. Unfortunately, I'm not able to. The police department has refused to give me a copy of that chat, so I haven't been able to read my son's actual last words. Homeland Security advised me that they want to get their feet wet in his case before they give it to me as well. However, the detective, so Captain Lyons advised me that his last words were pleading for it. Please don't post it. Please don't post it. I'm just 13. I'm just a child. Please don't.
And this was, please don't post it, being he'd sent them a picture or something.
That's what I'm assuming. I'm not 100% positive. He did, so that evening, so it was either the 5th or the 6th, and I'm not exactly sure. I know that I got a request from him at about 2:30 in the morning on Snapchat with a new username. Mm-hmm. So he had added me as a friend, as a new user to a new account, and he added his sister and his brother and both brothers and a bunch of his other friends that morning as well.
He told them, get rid of my other one,
so
just use this one.
He actually sent a message. I don't know if he sent messages to other people. He sent a message to his ex-girlfriend, who was one of his good friends, that stated, don't open anything from my old Snapchat account, and make sure you don't add it back if they add it, if it adds you. And I just assumed, knowing that he had just committed suicide, I assumed that, oh, well, maybe he had posted something in his last moments that was desperation, and he thought better, and he locked himself out of it somehow. Like, he couldn't think of the password or whatnot. Because I didn't know, and I was in the dark in regards to this, and shame on me as a parent for not knowing the dangers of this.
You blame yourself in part of this?
Of course I do. Logically, I know that it's not my fault. I tried to do everything I could do in regards to conversations. But as a parent, you always think, what could I have done different? If I didn't give him Snapchat back, he never would have been contacted. But I assumed that at that point, he had posted a picture in his last moments, potentially with the gun. So that morning, I told Detective Wade from the police department that he did 99% of his communication via Snapchat. We tried to get into his phone with the password that I knew what it was. He had changed it. I asked his friends, like his best friends, if they knew it. I asked his sister, his brothers. No one knew it. We tried it. And then at that point, Detective Wade said that, yes, it looks like it's a suicide. We do have to do an autopsy. Autopsy report came back, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. No drugs were in his system. And that was really kind of, Detective Wade had kind of communicated with me a little bit throughout the process, via text message quite a bit. On April 18th, I asked her, I followed up with her in regards to Snapchat, and I asked her, because it just didn't make sense to me, like, why did you create a new account that morning if you were just going to kill yourself?
Right.
So I asked her, I was like, have you requested official copies of his Snapchat communications? She replied back to me on the 19th of April saying, no, I have not. And I'm a firm believer of the mom questioning. I mean, I'm a mom to 6 kids. Of if I ask, I'm not really asking, I'm saying, hey, do this.
Right.
Maybe I should have said do this. But I didn't think I needed to tell a detective how to do their job when I don't have a law enforcement background. So very limited communication between me and the Sumter Police Department from the 19th of April. I did ask them several times if they had talked to Timothy's best friend, whom I gave that Detective Wade his parents' telephone numbers, both the morning of, and then I also gave her supervisor their telephone numbers on May 5th, I think, the first week of May. They had not talked to him. They still have yet to talk to him, to see if he knew if anything was going on. On June, so throughout this process, I did try to talk to Detective Wade, or Sergeant Kelly, who was her supervisor, who's now Lieutenant Kelly at the Sumter Police Department, with no phone calls back, or very limited phone calls back with, there's nothing new. On June 22nd, I went up to the police department and essentially demanded to speak to somebody. And I was told by the desk sergeant there that Sergeant Kelly, who is Detective Wade, was out for class, and Sergeant Kelly was in a meeting and that she'd give me a call within the hour. So I waited. No call. On the 27th of June, I called up to Chief Rourke, I called up to the department and asked for Chief Rourke. I got his secretary and I explained to her the lack of communication. I don't know what's going on with my son's suicide case. I really want to know. Couldn't speak to Chief Rourke. Never called me. At that point, about 5 minutes after I hung up with Chief Rourke's secretary, Detective Wade called me and said, "What's up? I heard you trying to get a hold of me." "Yeah, I'm trying to get a hold of you. What's going on?" She told me that they had subpoenaed Snapchat, or they put a search warrant in for Snapchat, and they got a partial download, is what she said. I don't know if it was a partial download from the phone. She said that it was still locked, but her words were it was a partial download. And part of that download was a couple of conversations on Snapchat, and one of them being his ex-girlfriend slash best friend, one of his best friends. And that conversation going back to, don't open anything from my old Snapchat. And that was it. And then she told me she was going to put in a second search warrant for Snapchat and also one for Cash App. I didn't think to ask questions because, again, I didn't have any understanding of why would you want Cash App, except for the fact that Timothy, prior to his death, had a little side business of selling candy at school to his friends. And the day or two prior to his death, he had over like $80 in cash, like in just bills alone, not including the change. And
Very entrepreneurial.
yes, he was always one to make a quick buck. Hey, can I clean your car for $10? And he'd even bargain with you, like, I'd be like, no, how about 5? Okay, go do it. So he had money, and when we were going through his room to see if there were any notes or whatnot, and I don't know who said it, if it was my son or Leah, or if it was Jeff, my husband, where's his money? Because the only thing we could find was his empty wallet, and I think it was like a total of like 65 cents on his desk, not the $80. So we couldn't figure out where that money was. And we did tell Detective Wade that. My husband called Detective Wade when he couldn't find it and was like, hey, just so you know, like, I don't know if there was any type of like bullying at school where he got jumped maybe. Like, he didn't have any bruises that we knew of, but maybe he got jumped for the money. But so on the afternoon of June 26th or June 27th, Detective Wade told me she was putting in a second search warrant for Snapchat and Cash App. Not thinking anything of it. I was thinking maybe she thought he sent some money to somebody. So fast forward to September. On September 12th, I got a notification. The kids, myself, and my husband are all on Life 360. Tim is part of that circle, and like, it's always saying, like, when you look at it, it says phone network off, which we still pay his bill because I didn't want to interrupt a police investigation by cutting it off if in fact someone had tried to contact him on it.
Smart.
On Life 360 that day on September 12th, there was a notification, and I still have screenshots of it, that says Timothy completed a 3-mile drive. And I looked at my phone, and I looked at my husband, who's sitting next to me in the truck. I was like, that says Timothy, right? Not Travis. He's like, that says Timothy. So at that point, I pulled up Life 360 and thinking, well, maybe the police got into the phone. No, it still said phone no network found or something like that, because the phone was off. So I called on the 13th. I called Detective Wade. Couldn't leave a voicemail. Texted Detective Wade that same day saying, hey, just checking the status of Tim's case. What's going on with it? No response back. So on the 14th, I decided to bring my book to the police station, where I sat and said, I'm not leaving this police station until somebody tells me something. So at that point, Detective Hansen and Staff Sergeant Melton brought me back into the investigations room and said, how can we help you? Like, I want an update on my son's case. I'm like, the last time I talked to the detective that was working it was June 27th, and she told me she was going to follow up with me when she got the second search warrant. And I haven't heard back. I'm like, have they gotten into the phone? Was there anything found on Snapchat? Was there anything found in Cash App? Okay, so let me check on the phone, said Staff Sergeant Melton. Staff Sergeant Melton walked out of the room to check on the phone. That's when Detective Hansen said, well, ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you that your son's case has been closed.
Closed?
Yes, sir.
And this was just weeks ago, a few weeks ago, a month ago.
Yes, sir.
Did they give you a basis for that conclusion? Did they give you a disposition of how it was closed?
They did not. So Staff Sergeant Melton walked back in the room and told me, well, I have bad news. We couldn't get into the phone, and it's a paperweight. You can have his phone back. And I said, okay. So and at that point, I I kind of felt relief somewhat, like a little bit of closure, thinking, okay, well, at least we have the limited suicide notes because Timothy wrote a note saying that you have all done nothing. Please don't worry, you have done nothing wrong. Timothy did leave us a suicide note where he said, I love you all and you caused nothing of this. So if you guys are beating yourself up, don't worry. This wasn't your guys' fault. I love you guys. So at least we had the suicide note stating that it wasn't our fault and it was his decision. And I asked Detective Hansen and Staff Sergeant Melton, where do we go from here? How do I get his phone back? Like, am I allowed to have his stuff back? Like, are we allowed to have the special edition Glock that he used back? Because I would like to be able to hold the last thing my son held.
Tell us about that. What happened when you got that weapon back from?
So I wasn't there, and I'm really thankful that I wasn't there. My husband rode his motorcycle up to the police station, met with Captain Lyons, and the cell phone was in a box. Or not the cell phone, the gun was in the box. Captain Lyons told my husband, it may be a little dirty.
Dirty.
Those were his words. And Jeff said, okay, Jeff's a diesel mechanic. He's used to grease and grime and nasty stuff. When he's working on semi-trucks, you get dirty. So he walks out of the station, puts the box on the bike, and he says to himself, or he tells me, he's like, I was looking at the box and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just put the gun in my waistband and the box in the front of the shirt and tuck it in. Because it's only 2 to 3 miles from the police station to my house. So he opened the box, and there's brain matter all over the gun. My husband, who is a 280-pound diesel mechanic, almost passed out. It wasn't just a little dirty. It was unsavable. It was unsalvageable to the point where my husband had it sent off to someone who specializes in cleaning up crime scenes. And it was so dirty and so caked in that the brain matter and blood, the acidity of it, was actually eating away at the metal.
At the very least, they could have warned your husband about that. Wow.
That it wasn't just a little dirty.
Let's talk about this investigation. There are promising leads. Tell us about this California connection to the phone.
So on the October 5th, I got a phone call from Captain Lyons at the police station saying, because I've been in contact with him to get more information because it didn't sit right to me that they closed the case without telling me. So on the 26th, he told me that the case was closed on September 15th, after I was told it was closed previously on September 14th. So September 26th, I asked him again, what happened to the second Snapchat search warrant that I was told about? And he said, oh, I don't know. Let me look into it further. So on October 5th, so my husband got the gun back on October 4th, and he told my husband then that he had some news for me and he wanted to give me a call. So on October 5th, I got a phone call from Captain Lyons telling me that about the sextortion, that Timothy was pleading for his life and that there was a Cash App tag sent to Timothy and that they had submitted a search warrant to Cash App to find out this person and that it was a 53 to a 61-year-old female that lived in Los Angeles County, California. And I don't know if, in fact, they sent that information off originally back in June when they must have had that information, or if they did it after Captain Lyons discovered it in his closed suicide case.
And they also told you that there was evidence indicating that your son was trying to show whoever it was that he was trying to send them
So
the money.
I actually found that information on Timothy's iCloud, that Timothy had screenshots of where he was trying to send a $100 Apple gift card. I don't know if the Sumter Police Department has that because they had access to his iCloud the same way I did after I helped them get into it. But I don't know if they actually looked at his images. But there was pictures, screenshots of him trying to send a $100 gift card, an Apple.com gift card, as well as a very explicit video of a female pleasuring herself.
Mm-hmm.
That was, and those images were in his recently deleted files. But because I wasn't a cop and I didn't know what I should and shouldn't do, I didn't touch anything within his iCloud, so I didn't restore those. So I don't even know if Sumter Police Department has those.
Where does this case stand now? You indicated that there is one investigation has been closed, and frankly, the communication that you've received, disjointed, incomplete. It's embarrassing that you're having to have this cloud of uncertainty hanging over everything. At the very least, you should have been told from the beginning what they were looking at. But another investigation is now open. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about where it stands now.
On October 5th, when Captain Lyons told me about the sextortion, I asked him, I was like, how... He promised me that they were still looking into it, that they had contacted the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in order to see if this person was a true person and if in fact they were a victim of identity theft or something. And I asked him point blank, I was like, well, how are you going to follow up if it's in a closed suicide case? Like, how is my son's suicide case closed? And he's like, oh, well, it was opened. We opened a new case file. Okay. And we'll follow up on that. So my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, is actually, he kind of does this sort of thing for the DOD. And we contacted him and he's like, LA County is not one to just sit there and send one request because they've got millions of requests a day on top of their active crimes within the county. He said, call the national hotline for exploited children and start there because Sumter's over their heads. So I reported it to the NHEC, and they told me that an analyst would be in touch with me shortly thereafter. The next morning, after I reported it, I went up to the police station to get the case file for the sextortion, which was one page and one sentence on another page stating that on June 27th, Detective Wade found this. When in fact the search warrant from the original Snapchat request was issued on June 16th, and Snapchat replied on June 19th, and June 27th was the day that I called and talked to Detective Wade. I informed the police department, the captain at the police department, that I contacted the FBI's hotline specifically for this very thing. And that day, I got a phone call from the analyst who was assigned to the case with a victim advocate that was on the line as well. And now it is under investigation with FBI and Homeland Security.
Good. I hope they get some more answers than the local folks. And let me ask you this question. We talk about, Gavin's law, the new sextortion law in South Carolina, that would clearly apply in this case, assuming they can identify, well, wherever this individual is, whoever did it committed this crime, should be facing up to 20 years here in South Carolina. Obviously, it is a new law. As we mentioned earlier, it's a new kind of dynamic of investigatory emphasis for these departments. A lot of these smaller, and again, Sumter, a large city, one of South Carolina's larger cities, but still this is a new crime for them. Is this the kind of case that state and federal assets should be involved in early on? Do you think to sort of help provide some of the resources that maybe the locals don't have?
Absolutely, I do think that, because there are so many kids that are in this situation in general. I posted on Facebook the morning after I found out about it all, and there were so many comments of me too. And it wasn't so much me too, it was I knew somebody that this happened to. My son's a victim of this. My brother just had this happen to him. It's a very real thing, and we're losing so many people from this. In the police department, or at least my experience, the police department has little to no training, especially when a 13-year-old girl gets extorted similarly and gets told, you shouldn't have sent those pictures. Doesn't matter what they said. Mm-hmm. So it's still victim blaming. It's today's version of the victim blaming.
Weren't you told at some point in this process by the Sumter police, it's not our job to figure out why your son took his life? Is that?
Yes, sir. So that would have been a week after I got Timothy's phone back. I went up to the police station because I was told that I needed, in order to get a copy of Timothy's suicide report, that I needed to file a FOIA request. And at that point, I was kind of confused because I'm technically a victim of this crime, as the mother of the child. And I couldn't understand why I needed to file a FOIA request. So I called 3 times to the police station for the number that they had given me, and I got a phone call back from the captain that's in charge of the FOIA requests. And he told me to go to the county or the city website and fill out the FOIA request, and I can either mail it in or bring it up to the police department, and he'd have, I think it's either 10 or 20 days to get the case file for me. So I was actually on my way from Charleston to Sumter at that point. So I said, okay. I got back into town on Thursday, and I printed off the FOIA request. And the more I read and the more I wrote, the more upset I got at, why am I having to do this? Why can't they? They know what I want. So I sat there and went up to the police station the following Friday. And I met with Detective Hansen again, who was the person who told me that the case was closed and was in the room when I was told. And he was actually the one who reiterated it, that his phone's a paperweight. There's nothing we can do with it. There's nothing anybody can do with it, is what I was told. I went up to I went up to the police station asking to speak to somebody in charge that I didn't speak to the days prior. And they brought out Detective Hansen again. We went into the little room, and he said, well, ma'am, what do you want? And I was like, I want to see the case report, and I don't want to have to jump through hoops to get to it. And he asked me, well, why do you want it? And I looked at him and I said, because this is my son. This isn't just someone who's dead. It's not a dead body. It's my son. It's my 13-year-old son. I want to see what Detective Wade was able to find, if anything, about why he did this. And at that point, Detective Hansen looked at me and said, well, ma'am, it's not the Sumter Police Department's job to find a motive in regards to a crime. And at that point, I lost it. I told him that I didn't even want to have a conversation with him. I went up to the police, the front desk, where the desk sergeant sat there and tried to give me the number to Captain or Chief Works secretary. And I told him, please don't try to give me that secretary telephone number. I don't want to make a phone call just to have to leave a voicemail. And I said some kind words or not so kind words. And at that point, they sent out Captain Floyd, who's actually over the FOIA requests, who got me in touch with Captain Lyons, because Captain Floyd at that point recognized that, yeah, this investigation was a little bit botched.
A little bit. Well, we're going to get his information from you because we're going to acquaint ourselves with the FOIA department at the Sumter Police Office very soon on this case and pull all of this information, because if they're not going to give you the answers, well, they can try not to give them to us, but we're going to push for those records, the ones you've got, the ones maybe you haven't seen, to try and find out again. And it sounds like you've pieced together what happened. I mean, it sounds like we know what happened. We just have to find out who was on the other end of that phone on that fateful spring morning. Let me ask you this. Betsy, you went on social media earlier this month. You said that you were angry, that you were scared, but you said, and I quote, "I'll die on the hill of finding the person who did this."
Yes, sir.
What's it going to take to find that person?
I mean, anything and everything I will do. Because I really, really, really don't want another mother sitting here feeling the way I am, or another father feeling the way that my husband and my ex-husband do. It's the most painful thing knowing that your son was being extorted for money, for things, for whatever. And there is no one to turn to. I would go to the depths of the oceans and the highs of the mountains if I need to. And my ex-husband and I don't get along, but he would too. It's the one thing that we will fight for.
Heartbreak. There's no other way to say it. Heartbreak. A beautiful, beautiful little boy, just 13, commits suicide in the front yard, mommy and daddy inside, after a horrible online sextortion scheme. What is that? Now we all know what it is. Tonight, what happened? Joining us, special guest, his mom. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us.
A Sumter, South Carolina homeowner leaving for work thinks someone is sleeping or passed out in their yard. He tells his wife to lock the doors, check on the children as he looks into what's going on, and calls 911. Officers discover the person in the yard is dead, killed by a gunshot to the head.
Oh gosh, when I hear it stated like that, all I can think about are my own children. This boy, if I could just explain how he was just totally scrubbed in sunshine. So sweet, so smart, good grades, everything the boy every parent would want to have. How does this happen? I really want to thank you for being with us tonight, because this whole sextortion scheme that is targeting our youth, our little children, is vast. As a matter of fact, I understand a new lawsuit has been filed naming 600 other cases. Joining me, an all-star panel. What happened that morning inside the family home? Listen.
Timothy Barnett loves helping out around the house and is taken to making his mom's cup of coffee every morning. At 6:15, Betsy Hopman is surprised that Timothy isn't already in the kitchen and pours her own coffee, kissing her husband goodbye as he leaves for work. Moments later, Jeffrey Hopman calls his wife, telling her to lock the doors and check on the children because someone's passed out in their front yard. As he calls 911, Betsy Hopman goes from room to room, locating 5 of 6 children. Timothy is missing.
With me right now, Timothy's mom, Betsy Hopman. Miss Hopman, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Nancy.
Betsy, I almost didn't want to even play that sound because, you know, we have routines we go through every morning. My daughter gets up super early. I can hear her turning on the bath water. My son sleeps late. I have to go wake him up every morning, and he jumps up and gives me a big hug. And that is the normal routine. I'm just thinking on what I just heard that every morning, is this true? Your boy would come and make you a cup of coffee?
Most mornings, yes, ma'am. Every morning, almost every morning, he would get up. He'd be the first one up, and I'd walk into the kitchen, and he'd be having my tea kettle on for the French press.
Miss Hopman, before I go into the facts of this case, I've just got to tell you, we are so sorry about your loss, about losing your baby. I am so sorry.
I appreciate that.
Again, with me, an all-star panel. You know, a lot of people haven't even heard the word sextortion before. And joining me in a few moments is an expert in online safety, Tanya Jordan from BARC. But Betsy, tell me what happened that morning.
Sure. It was a morning like every other morning. My husband and I got up with the alarm. He went about his day, walked out the front door. A few minutes later, I get a phone call saying, lock the doors and check on the kids. So I go about the kids' rooms, check on them. They're all there except for Timothy. And I was like, okay, well, that's not abnormal. So I checked the bathroom to see if he was in the bathroom. He wasn't. Checked the kitchen where, like I said, he normally got up and turned on the kettle for my French press. And he wasn't there. So I walked out to the garage to see if he was at our drink fridge. Again, he wasn't there, and panic set in. And I realized when my husband told me to lock the doors, something must have happened. So I called my husband back and I said, what's going on? He's like, someone's sleeping in our front yard. And I said, I can't find Timothy. And he walked me through the house again. He's like, is he in the bathroom? Is he in the pantry? Is he in the kitchen? I was like, no. And at that point, I realized I woke up into every mother's nightmare.
Miss Hopman, it's so hard to hear what you're saying. It's so hard to hear it, knowing what happened. I don't know how you have the strength to tell this story. How do you keep going? How do you have the strength to tell other parents about what happened tonight?
The only reason I can even have that is because God allows me to have a voice that allows education for other parents so that they're not sitting in my seat.
Okay, you get the call from your husband. I just saw a picture and it looked to me like it was Timothy walking you down the aisle when you remarried. There, oh, what a handsome boy. You get a call, there's somebody in the front yard, lock the door, go check on the children. You find everybody but Timmy. Then what do you do?
Like I said, I walked through the house, making sure that he wasn't in his normal spots in the morning because, like I said, he normally woke up before everybody else. He wasn't. And at that point, I knew, but my husband told me not to come outside, that the cops were there. And a few minutes later, and it felt like eternity, my husband walked in the front door, and he still hasn't told me to this day what happened and who he found in the front yard. But as soon as I saw his face, you can hear me yell on our Ring doorbell camera, because at that point my heart broke.
When did you learn your baby, your little boy, and I know you have, I think, 3 boys, but I refer to both of my twins, they're 16 now, as my babies. When did you learn your sweet Timothy, this tastes like dirt in my mouth, had committed suicide?
About 6:30, 6:45 in the morning on April 6th of 2023.
How did you process not just losing your child, but learning your child committed suicide?
I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. It didn't make sense to me because he was such a normal kid. He was the kid that was the life of the party and the one that always tried to make people happy. He's the one who would come in and cuddle and make sure that mom was okay. And again, it truly didn't make sense to me because we had plans. He had asked me to take him to Tennessee, to Gatlinburg, for his birthday. And I was like, yeah, we can plan a trip, you and me, like, because I like to make memories instead of do gifts. And I was like, yeah, we can most certainly do that. And we were planning it. So it didn't make sense at all until I found out what happened.
Guys, what do we know did happen? Why is this beautiful boy, who I keep saying it over and over, there were no prior mental instabilities, there were no depressions, he had never ever threatened suicide, ever, never even intimated anything about harming himself or anybody else. I'm telling you, this is the boy every parent wants to have. So why is this beautiful boy dead? What more do we know? Listen.
Betsy Hauptman meets her husband at the front door, hysterically explaining she can't find Timothy. With tears in his eyes, Jeffrey Hauptman shakes his head at his wife, and she screams. The body in the front yard is Timothy, dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Security cameras show Timothy sitting in the family car in the driveway for 2 hours the night before, frantically scrolling on his cell phone. Sumter, South Carolina PD collect Timothy's phone and his school Chromebook, vowing to find out what drove the teen to suicide.
And again, isn't it true, Betsy, that Timothy, I have a nephew, Timothy, and I call him Timmy, even though he's grown now. So I've now started calling your son Timmy because I've read so much about him. Isn't it true that your son, Timothy, had never gone through bouts of depression, had never lost appetite, was never in prolonged periods of sadness, to your knowledge, wasn't bullied at school? None of the red flags we look for. No bedwetting, no self-mutilation, no slapping or bruising or pinching himself. Nothing to make you think he would ever have committed suicide.
There were no extreme signs. I mean, he was a 13-year-old boy, a 13-year-old boy that was going through puberty. Would I classify him as a depressed child? Absolutely not. But what teenager doesn't have the normal,
Yeah.
what's my place in life?
The normal ups and downs of going through middle school, entering high school. He is just 13 years old. You're sitting there playing his sax, part of, I take it, the school band. But I understand that night he was scrolling, and I've seen my daughter and my son do this. They scroll and scroll and scroll on their phones. I'm like, what are you looking at? And they typically say TikTok. And I've snuck up on them so many times to see what it is. And it's always with my son, some crazy prank. Some boys are trying to shoot a basketball from a car driving by or some crazy thing like that. My daughter's looking at fashion or skincare, but they look at it all the time. So Timothy was out in the car the night before just scrolling. Is that right?
So the security cameras show him sneaking out his window about, I want to say 2:45, 3 o'clock, and sitting in my car. And then you can see him on his phone, just scrolling through it. And unfortunately, the cameras aren't the greatest to see. We weren't able to see what he was scrolling through or what he was doing on his phone, but just that he was on his phone scrolling. And then at about 5 o'clock, 5:15, he goes off camera. And he comes back for a short few minutes, and then he goes back off for the final time.
So you had no idea he was outside in the car scrolling. And there's something very comforting about just sitting in the family car. I know when we would drive home from school, a lot of times in the afternoon, we would sit in the car in the driveway and listen to music and talk. It's just something, you're cocoon-like in the car. And I'm imagining him sitting in the car where nobody can see what he's doing. He knows you're asleep inside and he's scrolling. Had he ever done that before, to your knowledge?
He did it once before, from my understanding, but that's not an abnormal thing because much like you, Nancy, when I go on a trip anywhere, even if it was to the grocery store or to go get gas, I sit in the car for a few minutes and collect my thoughts because it's that almost soundproof space where I can block everything and anybody out. And Tim was a lot like Mom, where he needed that soundproof space to process his own thoughts.
Why is a 13-year-old little boy dead? Why did a 13-year-old who had never threatened suicide, never had mental instability or problems, no prolonged depressions, nothing? Why did he commit suicide? And what was he scrolling ceaselessly the night before sitting in the family car? What was so secretive he did not want his parents to hear about? Joining me is a very special guest who I've got to say is one of the bravest ladies I know, speaking out so other parents can learn from Timothy's death. But right now I want to go to Tanya Jordan joining us, online safety expert, chief parent officer of Bark Technology. It's an online safety company that helps keep children, kids, teens safe. And I've got to tell you, my children know, the whole family knows that I have Bark. Bark is kind of an online program you download on your phone and your children's phones and you sync them. And they're like a safety net that catches problems, curse words, bullying. I don't really know how they do it, but I will give you this brief anecdote. My son is the goalie. He's been a goalie forever in soccer. And when he was about in the 7th or 8th grade, he made this incredible save. And he was really horizontal. He went horizontal to stop the goal. And he did stop it. But his arm went through the net. And he got a big bruise from the net. And he took a picture of it. And he sent it to some of his friends and went, "Look what I got saving a goal." He was proud of the bruise. Well, Bark caught the bruise and alerted me about self-harm. That's how sensitive it is. So that's what Bark is. To Tanya, Snapchat. A lot of parents think if you go on to your child's scrolling history, their internet use, then you know what they've been doing. That is not true. All of this happened on Snapchat. Just very briefly, explain what is Snapchat. What's a snap?
Snapchat is an app that was launched to send disappearing photos, and children do not need the ability to send disappearing photos. It is now expanded to offer location sharing, which is problematic. It's become rife with drug dealers and now sextortion scams.
Guys, very often I'll be sitting with the twins and one of them will start laughing. I'm like, what? What is it? And they go, "It's a funny snap from so-and-so." I'm like, "Let me see it." And they go, "It's already disappeared, Mom. I can't show it to you." To Betsy Hoffman, this is Timothy's mom. Betsy, when did you find out about this horrible sextortion scheme against Timothy on Snapchat?
So I found out Timothy passed away on April 6th, and I found out from the captain of investigations here in Sumter on October 4th.
Joining me now is Ashley Jones, investigative reporter and anchor, WIS News, South Carolina. Ashley, thank you for being with us. I want to go back to the day that Timothy was killed. Tell me what you know.
From what I know, as far as what Sumter PD said in an incident report, on the morning of April 6th, Timothy's father found his body laying outside in the front yard. And from there, they called the Sumter Police Department, who came out and began an investigation. However, there were some, I believe, discrepancies as far as Sumter Police Department actually doing the investigation. There was something about they couldn't get into Timothy's phone to figure out what may have happened. There was a lot of back and forth between
Ashley, you know, it's amazing that you said that because you guys have already lived through this in South Carolina with the Alex Murdaugh trial. Remember what all we had to go through? They had to bring in the Secret Service to unlock a phone in order to place Alex Murdaugh at the dog kennels where his wife and son were murdered at the time of the murder. Remember that? I sat through that Secret Service guy testimony, and it was very, very intricate about unlocking the phone. Okay, so what is Timothy looking at for 2 hours and then commit suicide in the front yard? Listen.
Just before his death, Timothy changed the passcode to his phone, so detectives focus on the task of unlocking it. Betsy Hauptman tells Detective Kelsey Wade that Timothy mainly communicated over Snapchat, and Wade issues a subpoena for the teen's account. 11 weeks go by with no answers, despite Hauptman calling twice a week. Wade finally informs Hauptman investigators are submitting a second Snapchat subpoena, along with a subpoena for Timothy's Cash App activity.
Joining me, in addition to Timothy's mom, Betsy, is the family lawyer, Joe Cunningham, high-profile lawyer in that jurisdiction. Joe, thank you for being with us. They have to send a second subpoena to Snapchat. Why?
Well, Nancy, what we know is that the first subpoena that was sent to Snap, apparently from Snap's response, was not comprehensive enough or detailed enough to provide a response. So it required them to send a second one. And Since then, this investigation has been handed over to the federal agencies, the U.S. Attorney's Office, who is now handling this.
So it's amazing to me that in light of Timothy's death, you have to basically threaten Snapchat in order to get responses. And you've got the mom, Betsy Hartman, basically begging to get answers. What was my son looking at? Betsy, what was going through your mind when you're having to call twice a week to get answers and still not getting answers?
What were they doing to find out why my son killed himself? And unfortunately, I was told it wasn't Sumter Police Department's job to find out why he did it, just that he did it.
You know, that is amazing to me. And I'm going to circle back in a moment, Betsy, about when you took the phone away from him for a period of months. But right now, I want to focus on why the local police department told you to just figure it out yourself. Imagine you being in Betsy's position. You're trying to find out the cause your boy committed suicide, and you believe the answer is on his phone. I want you to listen to this.
5 months after Timothy's death, Betsy Hauptman gets a notification on Life 360 that Timothy completed a drive. Hopeful that detectives cracked his passcode, Hauptman calls Detective Wade with no response. Hauptman drives down to the police station, refusing to leave until she speaks with Wade. Hours later, 2 unfamiliar detectives inform her that Timothy's phone is equivalent to a paperweight. They're closing the investigation, and it isn't their job to figure out why her son killed himself.
A month later, Betsy Hauptman discovers Sumter PD unearthed dozens of suicide notes addressed to family and friends. They also found an extensive call and text record with an unsaved phone number with a New York area code. The text includes links to a second Snapchat account Timothy used. Messages on that account reveal Timothy sent a stranger $35 a day to prevent them from posting an explicit photo of him online. One of Timothy's last messages begged the stranger to stop, reading, quote, "Please, I'm just a child."
Sextortion. That's what's happening. That is why this little boy felt there was no way out and killed himself. Sextortion. To Tanya Jordan, BARC child safety expert, what is sextortion?
Sextortion is a combination of the words sex and extortion. And extortion is using threats or force to coerce someone into doing something. And so in the case of sextortion, a person is threatened that their nude photos or videos will be released unless they provide valuables, money, or release more sexual photos or videos.
To Ashley Jones joining us, WIS News 10 South Carolina. Ashley, what was the threat on Timothy? What was the sextortion?
Well, so from what we know is that this person, whomever it was basically telling Timothy unless he sent them $35 a day via Cash App, then they would post this nude photo of him online.
Oh, my stars. Oh, my stars, to think this boy is gone because some evil person is sextorting a little child. To Joe Cunningham, the family lawyer, what more do we know about the plot? Who was behind it?
Well, this is still under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office, Nancy. Unfortunately, what we know is this is not an isolated incident. A lot of these originate from the Ivory Coast of Africa, where people pose as young teenage girls and befriend teenage boys and engage in a flirtatious manner, soliciting nude pictures, only to later on come back, screenshot the list of their friends and family members and extort them for money. Otherwise, they'll release these particular pictures. This has become very common. I want to thank you for shining a light onto this, because here's a statistic that your viewers need to know. Snapchat did a survey a while back and said that 2/3 of Gen Z teens or young adults, either themselves or people they knew, had been victims of sextortion. 2/3. So it's unfortunately, it's not an isolated incident. This is the worst case scenario, though, for any family to have to go through.
Guys, it is by far not the first time a teen boy or girl has been targeted in sextortion. For instance, in a case I recently investigated, a superstar kid, much like Timothy, is online chatting with a beautiful girl his age, and the girl gets the boy to send a nude photo. Well, it turns out the girl is not a young girl his age at all. Listen.
Over the course of a short conversation, Samuel Ogashi, pretending to be this young woman, persuaded Jordan to send a sexually explicit image of himself. Once Samuel Ogashi had that sexually explicit image in his hand, he then turned to extort Jordan DeMay for money, threatening to reveal the image to Jordan's family and friends if he did not comply.
This kid, Jordan DeMay, a high school superstar, and you are hearing the U.S. Attorney Mark Totten speaking. Listen.
Jordan DeMay paid what he had, which was $300. But Samuel Ogashi continued his threats, demanding more from Jordan. A few hours later, Jordan told Samuel Ogashi that he was now taking his life. And Samuel Ogashi, responding through the Instagram persona of Danny Roberts, told him, "Do that fast, or I'll make you do it."
Look at this boy, Jordan DeMay, who committed suicide after sextortion. His father spoke to me in depth. Listen.
If things happen, it's not the end of the world either. Jordan's story is so tragic, and this is something that probably would have been laughing about in 10 or 15 years after he's graduated college and gotten married and had kids and bought his first home and, got a career job and did all the things. You'd look back and kind of like, that was stupid, right? But in that moment, you can't. They're not old enough to understand it. They're not developed enough to understand.
Betsy Hotman takes Sumter PD's findings to the FBI and Homeland Security. A federal investigation is immediately opened, and detectives find that the Cash App account Timothy sent money to belongs to a woman in Los Angeles County. A suspect has yet to be identified, but Timothy's family is encouraged by how seriously the feds are taking their son's case. Both Betsy Hotman and Jamie Barnett have criticized Sumter PD for closing their investigation, but the parents' focus lies on finding justice for Timothy.
Joining me is Timothy's mom, Betsy Hotman. So, getting fed up with no answers from the local PD, you take your case to the FBI, and they take it on. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I called the National Hotline for Missing and Exploited Children myself after I found out from Captain Lloyd that Timothy was sextorted, because it took them so long to even do anything.
Joining me right now is a special guest, former detective, cyber crimes detective, child crime expert, and president of Be Sure Cyber Training. You can find him at BeSureConsulting.com. Rich Wistocki. Rich, thank you so much for being with us. Explain to me what you should do to protect your child and how we can crack this case and determine who sextorted Timothy.
Nancy, it's unbelievable everything that I'm hearing today, because you know why? It's typical. Every week I get calls from parents and law enforcement all over the country. I teach about 300,000 children. I teach about 4,000 cops, and police departments are 10 years behind cybercrime investigations. So what happens is, when I go talk to kids in schools, I tell them, when no one is allowed to make you feel bad about yourself online, no one is allowed to make you do something you know you shouldn't be doing. If you're sitting here watching me and suffering in silence because this is happening to you, I can make your pain stop. Because when it comes to social networking and gaming online, Nancy, no one online is anonymous. No one. Now, these Yahoo boys who are out doing this, we can track them, but they have no fear because they know U.S. law enforcement, local law enforcement, doesn't have the training to track this stuff. And I will tell you, over the 300,000 students that I have worked with across the country, this year alone, Nancy, I had 35 students come to me after the presentation telling me this is happening to me. I had to start 28 criminal investigations through the Internet Crimes Against Children task force across the country.
Rich, I'm trying to think of ways to help parents. And Betsy is speaking out today. If you had to give parents one piece of advice to protect their children from sextortion schemes like this one, what would you tell them?
There are actually three things, Nancy. The first one is you need to be monitoring your kids' devices. Number two, you have to keep
Wait a minute. Rich. If we're talking about Snapchat, which is what Betsy Hartman's telling us about today, those images disappear immediately.
They don't, actually. Snapchat has them for 30 days. So,
but how is a parent supposed to know that? You say parent, you look at the phone, but on the phone, it disappears. No parent knows to call Snapchat and says, hey, what has my son been looking at in the last 2 days? That's not going to happen. Give me something I can hold on to.
Parents need to keep their children's phones out of their devices, out of their rooms at night. That's number one. And then what happens, parents don't know about Snapchat, and they need to be checking their My Eyes Only in Snapchat. This is a private cloud-based service that Snapchat has called My Eyes Only. And most of our children are hiding their most horrible pictures of themselves and others in it. Now, number one is that parents need to have the access code to their kid's device and spot check that. That's something you can hold on to. And if at any time a child changes their device because they're hiding something, you know something wrong. So imagine in this case, if the parent knew the access code to the phone, we could have unlocked that phone and traced that within hours of where it came from. And that's what I trained my law enforcement officers to do.
Well, here's the thing, though. Betsy, you knew the code, and you had actually found, long before, a naked photo of a woman. And you're like, no, we're not having this. And you talked to him, you reprimanded him, you counseled him about it, you took the phone away for a period of months, then you gave it back, you knew his code. You didn't know he had changed his code. That would be like 24/7 monitoring on your child to find out if they sneak off to the closet and in 3 minutes change their code to their phone.
Exactly. I mean, I got on Snapchat myself because my 14-year-old niece at that point was like, Auntie, get on Snapchat. It's got a lot of filters and we can snap back and forth and whatnot. I never imagined sending anything because as an adult, I knew when you send us stuff on the internet, it never, quote unquote, truly goes away. So Timothy was on Snapchat because that's what kids these days do.
That's what they all do, Betsy. All of the preteens and teens and a lot of adults are on Snapchat. Nobody is on Facebook at that age, and many other platforms. Yes, exactly. And joining me, I don't want to forget about this. Joe Cunningham is with us, and that is Betsy's family lawyer. I've got in my hands a big fat lawsuit. What is it, Joe?
We filed a lawsuit against Snap for wrongful death for the damages that Betsy's family has gone through and suffering this unimaginable loss. And the basis of that lawsuit is negligence. It's negligence per se, but it also centers around Snap putting out a defective product. They put out a product, as you mentioned, that has the images disappear. Now, anyone can imagine what the anticipated use of a product like that actually will be. And it's welcomed predators onto their platform, and without the proper guardrails in place to monitor, to make sure that people are of age who are getting on, but also to prevent predators from accessing the website and communicating with children.
The day after a winning football game, Braden Marcus, 15, spends the day inside playing video games with his friends. Just after 11 a.m., a pretty girl messages Braden on Instagram, and the two exchange flirtatious messages for about 5 minutes. The girl requests they move the chat to Google Hangouts and sends Braden lewd photos, asking for photos of him in return. Braden is hesitant, but caves and sends several explicit photos. The girl then reveals herself as a scammer and threatens to release the photos unless Braden sends them $1,800. By 11:28 a.m., Braden took his own life.
This boy, just 15, commits suicide after a sextortion plot. Guys, I've got so many files here on my desk of children committing suicide after sextortion. To Betsy Hoffman joining us, this is Timothy's mom. Did you have any idea how widespread sextortion on even preteens? I know you heard me talking about Amanda Todd, who was just 12. Sextortion plots on our preteens and teens. Did you have any idea how rampant it is?
No, ma'am. I definitely didn't. One of the only reasons I ever heard of sextortion was a few short months after Timothy passed, when South Carolina instated Gavin's Law, where our Representative Guffey, his son, back in, I believe, August of 2022, took his life because of it too. And South Carolina now, it's an aggravated felony if in fact a minor hurts themselves or commits suicide because of sextortion.
Well, you're absolutely right. Take a listen to South Carolina Rep. Brandon Guffey.
Gavin was being blackmailed. That was all the information that I knew, was that he was being blackmailed. But what happened was Gavin was, he got caught up in sextortion, and this is a major crime. They took, looks like, Hunter Biden headlines and put pictures of Gavin and put my name and his name on the headlines, and were threatening to release it. And it was pictures to this girl that he was talking to online.
That boy is dead because of sextortion. Betsy, I've got to ask you something. Do you feel Timothy's presence with you?
Always. When he first got an allowance, Nancy, he bought me a heart, like a stuffed heart from the Dollar Tree. And now I'll find leaves that are shaped in hearts at my doorstep, or when I'm cleaning the pool, one will drop in front of me. I'll find hearts randomly on sidewalks. I know that my son's with us.
Betsy, what is your message? Your message to other parents out there today?
Have those tough conversations. Be open to those tough conversations. And just remember that the internet isn't something that we had back then. And unfortunately, I was naive enough to not think that predators, well, I knew that there were predators out there. I didn't think that there were predators so bold that would want to hurt a 13-year-old. And there are.
Betsy, somehow, some way, we're going to find who did this to Timothy. Somehow, some way, they're going to be brought to justice. And I want to thank you for speaking out tonight. I know I am speaking to my twins tonight about this. I've done it before. I'm doing it again. And I beg all the parents to spread Betsy's message. If we can just save one child from Sextortion. It's all worth it. Betsy, thank you. Godspeed, friend. We remember police officer, American hero Jamal Mitchell, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 36. He was trying to assist what he thought was a wounded victim when he was shot multiple times. Officer Mitchell survived by fiancee Tori, their children Cohen, Jalen, Caden, and Mason. American hero, police officer Jamal Mitchell. Thank you to our guests for being with us. Thank you for joining us tonight and every night. Thank you to our new MSM family, but especially thank you to Betsy sharing her son Timothy's story. You know how hard that was for her to talk in her effort to help just one child? Nancy Grace signing off. I'll see you tomorrow night, 6 to 9 o'clock sharp Eastern.
But I also share this with y'all. Can y'all hear me okay? Can y'all hear me okay? Testing. 1, 2, testing. Can y'all hear me? Hear me, sir? Okay, let me get right here. Let me share this with y'all right quick, okay? Got the PDF, the complaint filed for Timothy Barnett's family. You can actually go and get a copy of this. And if y'all want me another time to continue with this and y'all go over this, I'll be glad to. But here is where it's a wrongful death complaint against defendant Snap Incorporated, pursuant to code SC code section 1551. Get it bigger right here where y'all can see. Stated Timothy Barnett by and through Elizabeth Ann Barnett as personal representative versus Snap Incorporated. Yeah, there is a lawsuit, and this is the PDF of it. It's 20 pages long. There's also a prayer for relief. Let's go ahead and read that. Before plaintiff respectfully requests that the court enter judgment against the defendant, Snap Incorporated, and award the following relief. A wrongful death damage in excess of $10 million for the losses suffered by Timothy's statutory beneficiaries, including emotional distress and grief experienced by Timothy's beneficiaries for loss of his society, companionship, and support in an amount to be determined at trial. Funeral and burial expenses, punitive and exemplary damages in an amount sufficient to punish defendant's willful, wanton, and reckless conduct and deter others from engaging in similar misconduct. See plaintiff's reasonable attorney's fees and costs. D. Pre and post judgment interest, and any other relief the court deems just and proper. Jury demand. Plaintiff hereby demands a trial by jury on all issues so triable. Respectfully submitted. That's the Griffin Humphreys LLC. Want to thank you all for coming. Thoughts and prayers for all involved. Your see, scare your grandson or granddaughter doesn't live far from there. Prayer for their safety and all too. God bless each and every one of y'all, and be sure to share this information out there. As Nancy Grace asked, get out her story. Every parent needs to get out this story. Maybe it could save a life. Maybe it could save your child's life. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been a lengthy one, but I felt like it was all important. God bless y'all, and keep the faith, y'all. Be a voice for the voiceless. Thank you. God bless.